Hey everyone, and welcome to the 4th edition of Mr. D's Movie Club, and today we're going to get a little spooky. Who doesn't like a good scary movie? Maybe it's dark outside, it's a little stormy weather, and you put something on, it kind of just brings you alive in a weird kind of way. As humans, we've been telling stories to scare us since we've been telling stories around campfires. And I want to talk a little bit about horror films, understanding that horror films in an educational setting like this are always a little tricky, particularly with the age group that we're talking about. And they're tricky for a lot of reasons. One is particularly people of my age and my parents' age have an idea of what a horror film is. And it's something that is probably relatively unimportant, lots of blood, lots of guts, not a lot of talent or storytelling. And I understand where that comes from, though it's not entirely accurate for the whole genre. The other part of the challenge as a film teacher at the high school level is understanding, rightfully so, that parents and families and the school all have different ideas of what we should be exposing our students to. And I've made choices as a parent that I would never make as a teacher. You know, my daughter is very scared by horror movies, but also really likes them. And I think we watched the first Halloween film when she was 11. And actually at that point, she'd already been in a horror short that I made. So it was sort of fun for her to make it and to watch it so she understood how it goes. But one of the things as a film teacher, and it's with whatever genre that I introduce students to, is to try to be very cognizant of what parents do or don't want their students to see. And even though it runs the gamut from, oh, my kids can watch anything, to my kids have never seen this, that, or the other, I try to be very respectful for it. It's why in this movie club that I always put the common sense media rating as well as the movie rating and let people know that, hey, this might not work for this age group, but it might work for another. And so that's always one of the challenges when dealing with horror, because there are red flags that come up. But some of the greatest movies that have been made have been under the horror genre. Some of the ones I teach in class, I teach Psycho every year, I teach Jaws. And the thing to remember about this genre is it isn't always reduced to its most base, kind of what we think of the genre. That isn't really necessarily what the genre is. In fact, I would argue that the horror film is probably the most important genre in cinema. I think it is the genre that allows us to be the most honest about ourselves, about our society, about our culture. And I think in part because, generally speaking, they are set in such either outlandish or very heightened situations that we can inject real conversations about where the culture is going or things that we're afraid of as a culture, and they get woven so nice and neatly into the stories. For example, I am a lover of the old school Universal horror movies, the Dracula film, Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Mummy. I love all those movies. And if you think about what those movies represent, they're a lot of them made in the 30s, early 40s. They represent a big fear of what's out there. And if you think about what was going on in the world, we were post-World War I, it was very nationalist. We were afraid of foreigners. And so, of course, why not set a horror film in Transylvania or someplace like that where we're already kind of afraid of what comes from a place we don't understand? If you think about the horror films of the 1950s, the mad scientists, the large animals that grow, that was our fear of nuclear annihilation and that fear of science. So all of that weaves into the horror film. And so on and so on and so on, they continue. And so it's a very interesting genre to study, to learn a little bit about us, and also have a really fun time watching them. So I have 3 movies to recommend today, and I've basically broken them down by age groups and attention span. So the first one is Hotel Transylvania, which is a comedy, but it features archetypes or analogs to all of the great Universal monsters, but set in a not horrific setting. And it's not the first time this has been done. The Munsters did the same thing. Addams Family took horror tropes and turned it into a sitcom. So it's not that cutting edge, but it's a great way to introduce some of these very classic, in many ways very tragic literary figures to brand new audiences. I also want to recommend the original Wolfman. I love this film so much. And I do believe, where is it? Wait, one. I even have a little Wolfman pop. That's how much I really love this film. What I like about the movie is, on the surface, it's that sort of cheesy Universal monster movie. The transformation scenes aren't super high tech. They're very, very low budget, and to the point of easily parodied, easily riffed. But I really like the movie so much because it's very complicated. It features a monster who, while he's human, tries to prevent himself from becoming the monster that he knows is deep within inside himself. You know, that with the set design and the cinematography and the acting, it's just an amazing example of that golden age of Universal horror film. The last film, and this is for our little teenager audience, this one has a Common Sense Media rating of 13 and over. It's PG, but again, PG before PG-13 was the thing, and that is Poltergeist. Poltergeist is an interesting backstory in a lot of ways, one being the question of who directed. So the credited director is Tobe Hooper, but really it was produced and essentially directed by Steven Spielberg. I know there's a lot of arguments back and forth, and it seems to break down who you believe based on if you are a Tobe Hooper guy who's, I believe, an Austinite, shot Texas Chainsaw here, or a Spielberg guy, which is what I am. But the legend goes is that he was not able to direct two movies at once, was directing E.T., but would be on the Poltergeist set. And if you watch that film, it's a Spielberg film. And that's what I want you to look for when you watch it. It is a movie that at times is very scary. The effects are very dated. But what I love about it is it takes that Spielberg thing. Here's a normal family that is going to be thrust into some very abnormal situations that they can't quite control, and how do they react to those as a family? If you know anything about a lot of Spielberg's work, he is always exploring that question of family. He had a famously broken home. My film students know all about the Spielberg thing. And so a lot of the movies, when he got to maybe able to make his own stuff, dealt with what it was like to have a family that wasn't necessarily complete, or if it was complete, was challenged. And so the movie Poltergeist is, again, probably just scary enough to creep you out, not terrifying, not very bloody at all. There's one sort of kind of scary scene. But again, if you've got a house full of teenagers, I'm sure the parents out there have seen it. It's also funny to know going in that Lucas and Spielberg were best friends. They worked together. And so it was always neat for me when I watched the movie to see all the Star Wars stuff that's in the bedroom of the little boy. So those are our 3 recommendations for Mr. D's Movie Club, because we're going to get a little spooky this week. Hotel Transylvania, the original Wolfman, and Poltergeist. And now before I leave you with my impromptu werewolf movie that I shot without any effects, makeup, script, time, energy, or effort, because I was on a walk with my wife and saw a really cool moon. I know the one thing everybody tunes in for is the Vader cam. So let's see what the guy's doing today. And there he is. Vader, can you say hi? Oh, we're just going to roll over. All right, say goodbye, buddy.
Oh no. Run.